Hi everyone, welcome to number 3 in the Serenity series, legal webinars that are serious about your success. I'm Michelle Whitehead, and although I've been a bit scrambled this morning, hopefully the rest of this presentation will go according to plan. I'm just going to move my chat screen over where I can see it and start by sharing my screen. There we go. So, this is all about privacy policies today. Why do we want them? What do we need them? What are they? They're pretty much a boring, ubiquitous, one of those legal documents that you see everywhere. But when you dig into them, there's a lot there. I found out things I didn't know while I was preparing this. So that sort of explains just how much is involved in these things. So to get started, do the normal little introductory bit, which is about me. I'm a homeschooling mum, and my 4-year-old's awake at the moment, but I've tucked her into bed with a bottle of milk and her iPad, so hopefully she'll let us get through this in one piece. I've also got 2 boys who are pretty much guaranteed to sleep through the whole thing. I'm also a lawyer and a mediator. I started out wanting to be a writer, and law is just another form of storytelling to me. It's a very interesting and curious one because you can really get into, there's so much to dig into. And I'm also an entrepreneur, and that's where I found what really makes the law come alive for me. And that is using it to ground your gorgeous castles in the air, to give you the safety and security that you need to make your business a success. So let's talk about privacy policies. What we're going to do today, just a quick overview, we're going to look at what they are. Do you really need one? And if you don't need one, legally speaking, why would you want one anyway? We're going to look at what they protect and what a good one would contain. And then once you've got them, what do you do with them? And at the end of the thing, I'm going to do a giveaway, which isn't quite finished yet. I've been absolutely flat out this week working outside on our property. We're trying to get it all prepared, ready for sale. And so I haven't actually finalised the giveaway, but I'm just going to give you a link to join my Facebook group so that you can be on the spot to get it with the moment it's ready. And that will actually be one of those questionnaires. If you saw my website terms and conditions webinar, the questionnaire for writing your own that I did with that, there's going to be another one for privacy policies. So what is a privacy policy? At its basic, a privacy policy is a document describing how you collect and manage people's personal information. That's the official definition. So what is personal information? In the Privacy Act, personal information is defined as information or opinions, whether or not that's true, and whether or not it's recorded in material form, so whether it's written down or recorded on video or tape or whatever, about an identified individual or an individual who is reasonably identifiable. So that's a bit of that legal gobbledygook there. And it basically shows you that personal information is actually anything that can be used to give you information about someone where you know who that person is, or where you can work out who that person is from the information. Now, in the entrepreneurial sphere, the places where we're most likely to come in contact with personal information are when we're doing an opt-in, when we're collecting people's names and email addresses, when we're providing services to someone in whatever way we provide our services. You might be collecting their signature on a contract. You might be asking for their address, their phone number. I've seen people asking for names and dates of birth when they're doing astrology or readings for people. You might be asking for or you might be coming in contact with their bank account information for various reasons, their PayPal account information. And you'll also be recording their personal information in your notes. every time you write down a comment about someone or your opinion about someone or anything in those lines, that's actually personal information. So when you write down even anything that they could be identified from, so you know, information about their health, information about what, this is going to be really specific to whatever the service is that you provide. But if you think really carefully about what it is that you might write down about someone, and just realize that personal information has a very broad coverage. So who actually needs a privacy policy, legally speaking? Government agencies must have a privacy policy. Businesses and not-for-profits who have an annual turnover greater than $3 million. So if you're very unlikely to be earning $3 million a year, I assume at this stage, but if you are, then you must have a privacy policy. And some small businesses. So not all small businesses, but some small businesses. And this is the thing, it's private sector health service providers. Now, this is a really broad catch-all definition again. Most people consider their health information to be highly personal, and they need to have confidence accessing the health services they need. But the definition covers more than just traditional health service providers. So it's more than just hospitals, GPs, pharmacists. It also extends to complementary therapists such as naturopaths and chiropractors. It extends to gym and weight loss clinics and to childcare centres, private schools, private tertiary education institutions. But it doesn't just, those are the examples that the government provides, but it really, anyone who is involved in someone else's health and well-being risks being under the definition, under this definition, and then the privacy laws will apply to you. So if you provide any sort of service where you're assisting people with information, advice, care in relation to their general health and well-being, or even specific elements of that health and well-being, then you need to have your privacy policy in place. Who else needs one? Businesses that sell or purchase personal information. So if you ever have any intention of selling your mailing list, not that I would hope you would, but that sort of thing, those people need to have a privacy policy. Credit reporting bodies, contracted service providers with a Commonwealth contract, any employee association registered or recognised under the Fair Work Registered Organisations Act. I'll leave that highlighted one for a minute. Businesses related to a business covered by the Privacy Act. So even if you're not actually running a healthcare service, if you are related in some way, if you are connected with them, you might be covered by the regulations, and businesses specifically prescribed by the privacy regulation. There's a specific list. So let's go back to businesses that have opted in, and we're going to look at why would you opt in. So you can actually fill in an opt-in application form. There's a public opt-in register, and I'll just move this onto my screen for the moment and just show you. I'll just pop the chat box over here and I'll stop that share, and I'll just share a different screen for a second. This one here, share screen. So this is, did that work? I'm not sure. I can't see that now. I've still got my slides. No, okay, it's not going to work. Anyway, you can go to this link and you can see what the opt-in register looks like. And the opt-in register actually is a, it's just a page where you fill in some details, your ABN, your privacy policy. Can you just let me know, can you still see the slides, or did it actually go to the opt-in page? Natalie or Shalini, can you just let me know if you can see the slides still? try share screen. I'm just going to go back to that one to make sure. Just to make sure. Okay. So, yeah, you can go to this link. You can see the opt-in register that allows you to fill in your details and opt in. And opting in is making a public commitment to good privacy practice. This option, thanks Shalene, this option is available to provide small businesses and not-for-profits with the opportunity to benefit from any increase in consumer confidence and trust that may be derived from operating under the Privacy Act. So they see it as a bonus for you that you actually get, particularly if you're in an industry where privacy could be very important to people. For example, if you are collecting people's birth dates and a lot of private information about them, I know various people I've spoken to in relation to astrology and other more spiritual services that are out there that heart-centered entrepreneurs tend to offer. They do collect a lot of your private information. And in that situation, if you are collecting a lot of private information from people, it might be something that would give your customers and your clients and the people you work with more confidence if you register. Or the other thing is you don't actually have to be registered and listed on the public opt-in if you don't want to. You can simply display your own privacy policy and it becomes like a private undertaking to your people. Yeah. Direct marketing. There are special rules for direct marketing under the Privacy Policies Act. In general, things like telemarketing, advertising via email, SMS or post, all these things that we do as entrepreneurs, they are covered with the Australian privacy principles, but there is a distinguishing, we need to distinguish between the legislative requirement and best practice. A small business that is not covered by the Privacy Act, so those ones we looked at, they actually have no legal obligation to let people unsubscribe, ask for double opt-ins or not spam people, at least in Australia. They might be subject to privacy laws overseas. But then it all comes down to treating people how you would like to be treated. So if you're collecting their personal information in any form, it's really, really good practice, even if you're not legislatively required to set out for yourself exactly, to go through these questions, set out for yourself how you collect and deal with people's personal information so that you know for your own peace of mind that you have a secure system in place and that you are looking after the people who trust you. And in relation to spam, don't forget that there is a Spam Act, which I'm not going to go into today, but it does require people to give their consent to receiving emails from you and things like that, which is why we have the click the confirmation email button and all those sorts of things, the double opt-in process. So what goes into a privacy policy? This is where we look at the nuts and bolts of how to write a good one. The first thing is your introduction. Identify who you are and establish yourself as a trustworthy entity. Basically, when people give you their names, their email addresses, their identifying information, they are giving you their identity. And we all know about identity theft and identity fraud and how easy these days it is for that information to be misused. So they are providing you with their trust. And the first thing you need to do is to establish that you are also a trustworthy person. Entity means a legal body. So that could be you as a person, a sole trader, in which case you would give your name, your ABN, and the name that you trade under. An entity is also a company. So if you are incorporated, then you put out your company name and your ACN. Oh, I hate the way autocorrect always changes that to CAN. It is not a CAN. It is an ACN, an Australian company number. If you're a trust, so maybe a family trust or some other form of, you operate under a trust structure, then you would declare your trust structure in the way that you need to declare yourself as a legal legally identifiable, trustworthy entity. So they know who you are, who they're dealing with in a legal sense. You set out your statement of intent. So, for example, if you're choosing to comply, either voluntarily or because you have to, because you're legally obligated to with the privacy principles, you could say, we are committed to protecting the privacy of our contacts, customers, suppliers, employees, and complying with the Australian privacy principles set out in the Privacy Act. Or you could make a less formal declaration, such as in this policy we describe how we manage your personal information, but you could really get personal with this. Set out your statement of intent. You know, your personal information is important to me. I appreciate the trust you've placed in me by providing it. This is, I undertake to protect your information, and this is what how I'm planning to do that. I'm just running through my notes there, where it was up to there. Now, the next thing you identify is the kinds of personal information that you're collecting. And the important thing to remember here is to be as specific as possible. So really map out for yourself all of the different types of personal information that you collect. That could be contact details, the name. You might be collecting people's roles, positions, or occupations, their address, their email address, their mobile number, landline number, and fax number. And just really think about all the different ways that you collect information and what is the actual information that you collect. And this is where it becomes tricky when you borrow a privacy policy that's quite generic. Policy privacies are the sorts of things that you can relatively easily borrow a generic one from and adapt it, a template. But it's here that you need to really get specific and really think about the personal information that you in your business actually gather and collect, or that you might be about to gather and collect, that you might expand into gathering and collecting. So you might be taking information relating to their circumstances and affairs, their personal affairs, their financial affairs, their family information, any information that's relevant to the issues that they've come to see you about. You might be collecting information about their interests, their broader interests and their requirements. So in your market research, you might be taking information that's personal to them. You might be taking information that helps you hone and fine-tune the services, or you might be putting them on mailing lists for future services. You might be collecting information regarding how they communicate with you, information they provide to you in regard to attending seminars and promotional events, such as webinars or conferences or those sorts of things. If you're an employee or a prospective employee or subcontractor or VA, you might be collecting information about their qualifications, skills, and work experience. You might be collecting information about your suppliers or prospective suppliers, information about their business skills, services, products, prices. You might be doing that with people you're going to collaborate with too. A privacy policy is not just a one-off document on your website. You'll also find mini privacy policies in all sorts of contracts, employment contracts, supply contracts, subcontracts, VA engagements, all those sorts of service contracts will all have their own type of privacy policy, or they may have separate privacy policies. You may collect different information for different services, and you might have small mini privacy policies that relate specifically to those higher level services where you'll be collecting more information from people. The next thing to specify is how and when the information is collected. Again, you need to be as specific as possible. For example, we collect the information when you contact us with a question or inquiry, when you subscribe to our newsletter or update services, when we undertake our own searches and investigations, when you visit our website, cookies and things like that. That's collecting people's personal information. You're collecting their IP address, things like that. You're collecting information about how visitors to your website behave. When I look at MailChimp and I see who has clicked on my links, that's collecting personal information about you. When you attend a seminar or event where we are hosting or presenting, when, for example, for me, when you instruct us to act for you, or when someone gives you instructions or purchases a service, for example, what do? Do you open a file? Do you do a conflict check? When does all of those times you're collecting personal information? And when other people might provide information to you regarding other people. So, for example, if an entrepreneur came to me and said, I've got a conflict with another entrepreneur, then I would be collecting personal information about that other entrepreneur without their permission. So I have to make people aware that I do that other people might provide information to me about third people if that information is relevant to the advice or services I'm providing. You need to specify whether you only collect info directly from the people that you're talking to, or whether you collect info from third parties. And that could be quite broad. That could be someone, depending on your service, someone could be telling you about their husband or their friend or their colleague. All of that information is personal information, and it comes under your privacy policy, even if those other people haven't consented to that information being provided to you. And you still have to be aware of the sensitivity of that information and have a plan for how you are going to deal with it, to manage it. And that brings us to the next thing. Any professional regulations or limitations on the information that you collect. So, for example, a solicitor is required to collect the full name and address of all their clients. That's a legislative requirement that's placed on me, separate to any privacy policy. The privacy policy acts in addition to any other professional regulation. So, for example, psychologists, some healthcare professions, a lot of different professions have their own regulations and requirements for what kind of information you collect and how that information must be handled. And that acts in addition to the privacy policy, not either or. So just because you have your privacy policy doesn't mean you are suddenly exempt from these other regulations that you have as a professional responsibility. And then you can also make people aware of any limitations on the service. So, for example, if someone does not provide you with accurate personal information, you may not be able to do what they want you to do or to achieve the purpose for which the information is sought. For example, if you're going to someone, I'm mentioning astrology a bit today because of the birth date thing, but if you're going to someone for an astrology reason and you give them a false birth date, then the service isn't going to come back correctly. If you come to a lawyer and you give us false information, then the service we provide is going to be obviously compromised. And it's important to make people aware of the reason that this is the reason why they're trusting you with the personal information. That it's not just for some gratuitous purpose, it's really so that you can provide the service to them as best possible. And that brings us to the purpose of the collection. So you need to tell them what you're going to use the information for. So, for example, you might collect, hold, and use the personal information. Collect, hold, use, and personal information. That doesn't make sense. Obviously, this is what happens when I don't take the time to proofread my slides. Collect, hold, and use personal information. Not right now, Marie. Later. David's awake. Can you ask him to get it for you, please? I can't stop now. I'm recording. Well, bring me the milk bottle from the fridge and I'll fill it for you. I'm recording, Marie. I'm recording. Go. Sorry. So what will you use the information for? Glossing over that glaring proofreading error there. You might use it to respond to someone's inquiries, to provide your services, and you put in the information there and describe the types of services that you provide. You might use it so that you can employ competent and diligent personnel who will assist you to provide the services. You might use their personal information to monitor and improve their use of and satisfaction with your services. And you might use it to market to them, to let them know about news, expertise, products and services that may be of interest. This is again going to need to be specifically customized to what you actually use the information for. Then there's the issue of disclosure. When do you share the information with others? Who do you share it with? And whether you disclose your people's personal information overseas. That's a big thing in America because American privacy laws are quite strict and quite different. If you're sharing personal information, that can cover things like even down to knowing who your email host provider is, where the electronic signature service that you use is based. It's something I hadn't mentioned in the video I recorded recently on electronic signature services, but if your electronic signature service is based overseas, and then you're effectively sharing their personal information. When your client in Australia goes to that site to sign your contract, you're actually effectively sharing their personal information, disclosing their personal information to an outside Australia. So that's something to be aware of, is just to really work out where each of your providers is based and either disclose that, some of our providers, service providers are based overseas, or some of our service providers, all of our service providers are in Australia. We do not disclose any of your personal information overseas, and really make that commitment to knowing where your service providers are based, and really sticking to ones that are in the jurisdiction where you operate. And that really, really, really comes down to looking as closely as possible at the nuts and bolts of how you actually operate, and getting really, really aware of your business, of knowing the details behind how personal information is shared. Hi, Glenn. Okay, the next thing to do, really the last thing to have in your privacy policy, is a list of people's rights. David, can you help Marie get some milk, please? And help her go back to the bedroom. I'm recording this. Sorry, everyone, children. So, their rights. They need to know how they can opt out and unsubscribe. When they give you their information, they are trusting you. They are signing up for a particular service. They need to be able to. They need to be able to know clearly how they can change that information, how they can take that information back from you. Your security provisions, once again, that's, for example, if you're collecting very personal information from people, how do you store that information? Who has access to it? Is it kept on passworded computers and in locked filing cabinets? Or is it, how do you really manage that information? How do you make security a priority? How can they access, correct, and update their personal information? So you have a little procedure. Think about, how do you want people to contact you if they want to change their name or change their email address? Make it easy for them. How you will let them know when your policy changes. Do you just, that can be as simple as, when our policy changes, we will post an updated copy on our website, or we will email it to our mailing list. It doesn't have to be complicated. You just have to let them know that this is what you will do when you change your policy. And finally, how they can contact you if they do feel that their privacy has been breached, and your procedures, what you will do about it. You will respond within a certain amount of time. Here's the email address and the phone number that you can call. Here's a postal address. If you're not satisfied with our response to your complaint, give them the opportunity to seek review by contacting the Office of the Australian Information Commissioner, and give them a link to the Office of the Australian Information Commissioner. All of those things make it really easy for people to know what their rights are and how you protect their rights. Which brings us to the giveaway, and I do have the confession to make that the giveaway is not finished. I've been so flat out, I really just haven't finished putting it together. So I can't give you the direct opt-in link, but I can say that if you jump into my Facebook group, it will absolutely be available there, and I'll be offering it as an opt-in in various other places over the next few weeks. If you saw the website terms and conditions giveaway, this will be the same sort of beta testing, a questionnaire that leads you step by step through all of the questions we've just discussed, but really focusing in on what you need to ask yourself to get the information out of your head and onto the page, and then a draft document that you can just slot that into, so that you have a very professional privacy policy ready to go, using your brands and colours and logos and everything. And that final tips, cover the basic elements, but keep it as short, as sweet as possible. Basically, once again, you don't want your privacy policy to be War and Peace. You just want it to be as open and transparent and understandable as possible. Use your formatting, your headers, your bold type to make it easy to read and understand. Use your consistent range of terms. Call a spade the whole way through, not sometimes spade, sometimes a shovel, sometimes a fork, sometimes a diggy thingy. Yeah, just call it the same, decide on one term and stick with it. And really put yourself in your visitor's shoes. Think about how you feel when you're asked to give your private information, and what kind of safeguards you would like to have in place when you give your information to others, and really write a policy that helps you, that really communicates with your tribe and shows them, communicates with your people, your clients, your customers, everybody you connect with, and lets them know how seriously you take the trust that they've placed in you. And that brings us to the end. I think I've raced through everything really, really super fast today because I was a bit nervous and there's been so many interruptions. So if anyone has any questions, now's the time to pop them up. If not, then how did that go? Did everybody keep up? Did all of that make sense? Is there anything I didn't cover in enough detail? Privacy policies, really for me, it comes down to that issue of trust and connection. That people are trusting you with their information. And even if you're not legally required to have a privacy policy, having one is, to me, is best practice. It's part of that whole package, that whole sacred container you creating for your business. That whole establishing yourself as someone of of responsibility, as someone who cares, as someone who takes this stuff seriously. And yeah, that's right, Glenn. The trust that people have in you is very, very important. Natalie says, it was thorough. Every time you introduced something that I hadn't considered, and she started freaking out inside, I followed it up with calming information. Good, because it's not scary. Nobody's going to come along with a great big stick and beat you up because you haven't complied with the privacy policy regulations. Even if there's a breach, in most cases, there's opportunities to work it out. But really, the more time and effort you put in at the start to just thinking about what it is that you do, how you collect information, and really understanding that it is a sacred trust, that people are trusting you with their identity, you are holding their identity in your hands. And just thinking to yourself about how you do it, how you would like it if you were giving that information to someone else. What would you like them to protect? What would you like them to put in place to protect it? Yeah, it is making your ethical framework explicit, and that's it. It's really getting clear, not only for other people, but also in your head, in your own self, getting totally clear about where you ethically stand on all of this, what you want to be known for, what you want to be presenting to other people for your business, how you actually want to be taking on this trust that they're placing in you and dealing with it. And once you've got your policy in place and you've got your framework, then just to stick with it. That's the other important thing. Don't just write your privacy policy and say, oh yeah, that's done. Tick that off the list. It's up on there on my website. I never need to think about it again. Actually comply with it. Stick with it. Know what your privacy policy is. If you say you keep your files in a locked filing cabinet, don't leave them spread out all over your desk on little bits of paper. If you say that you only use an Australian mail server because you are committed to, for example, like me, I handle a lot of sensitive information. Well, you have to, don't go and use Gmail because it's easier. That's something I'm doing at the moment, and it's something I need to really, really rethink and actually pay for an Australian email server, because I've only recently started taking legal information through my own business. Always before, I've always made sure that whatever firm I was with had an Australian mail server. But recently I've just been lazy and I've been using my Gmail address instead of the web address that I set up for my website, which is actually, I went to the trouble to put that through an Australian server. So it's really easy. What I'm trying to say is it's really, really easy to forget and to do things for convenience's sake, but you're actually putting other people's information at potential risk. And so that then becomes the risk management question. How do I feel about allowing them to take that risk? Am I comfortable taking that risk? What can I do to increase everybody's security and safety? What can I do to be best practice? What can I do to be really taking that commitment as seriously as I believe it should be taken? And that really comes down to your personal ethics, your personal business practice, and really getting just clarity, increasing clarity. And it's not something you need to rush into, but it is something that you need to make a priority and think about. So if your website is with a specific server, you can ask them, where are your email services hosted? And you can either make the commitment to sourcing an Australian email host specifically. And I know a couple of those. If you need recommendations, just ask in my group. Or just to let people know in your privacy policy, just to put it up there that that your website is hosted with these people, that your email is hosted through these people, and that you personally have no control over where that information is stored, just so that people are aware of it. So you don't even have to fix it necessarily, but you have to make people aware of it so they're kind of giving informed consent. So informed consent was something I wanted to touch on briefly. So there are 4 key elements of informed consent in the privacy policy. The four key elements are that the individual is adequately informed before giving consent. So you've given them all the information they need in order to make a proper decision. That the individual gives their consent voluntarily. So basically you're not saying you have to say yes or I won't do this for you when it's something they desperately need. So you can't be sort of holding them to ransom for their information. The consent has to be current and specific. So that's what I'm saying, be as specific as possible and keep your privacy policy up to date. If you change circumstances, if you change situations, like I have done recently, you need to update things. And the individual has the capacity to understand and communicate their consent. And this is super important if you're working with anyone who's under 18, because under 18, they're not assumed to have capacity. They're a minor. So yeah, you have to really understand that if you're working with people who are disabled in any way or have any limitations, that you're aware of those limitations and that there may be difficulties with their consent. But it's all about just being as open and as transparent and as ethical as possible, and really just searching into it, digging into it, finding out what it is that you do, what it is that they need, and creating the privacy policy that explains that as clearly and as openly and as honestly and as transparently as possible. And that pretty much brings us to the end today. If there are no more questions, I'm going to sign off. Stop sharing my screen there. There we go. So I hope that that was all clear, and another month's Serenity series webinar is over. I'll do my best to get the privacy policy giveaway up in my group, the Business Serenity Facebook group, as soon as I possibly can. And in the meantime, have a lovely, lovely, wonderful week, and I'll see you soon. Bye.